Oddities, late night movies with Rob and Zack. This is a podcast about cinematic oddities where we discuss any media that is too bizarre, abnormal, or off-kilter for contemporary audiences. Occasionally, these projects gel. Most times they crash hard into the realm of obscurity. Join us as we delve into the cult classic swamp. I'm Zack.
And I played a psychic in an episode of a cop show, and they say it's a real thing. We are continuing on with Monstober, with the one and only, as far as we know now, Zack, substitution of Monstober. I really want to bring this up at the start because Zack had something else planned for this spot until he saw the movie we're discussing today. And I have a really specific kind of layout that I want to talk about this movie, how we got to this movie, all of our thoughts. And right before I throw over to you, Zack, with that question of how did we skip The Evil Dead for this movie, I want to just say that we are very happy to have LaShawn from LJ's Garage here once again. Thank you for being here, LaShawn.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I was excited. I actually had no idea what this movie was about, and I'm glad you guys invited me to, watch it, talk about it.
Yes. I think we're making good on a promise from back in the end of... I don't even think it was the end of Monstober. It was the end of the 2001 Fort year when you were here for Jeepers Creepers. Once Zack learned of your knowledge for horror, he just wanted you back here on the podcast. And we are so happy to have you back to talk about horror. So, Zack, now here's the question. Like I set up, this is a substitution. This was a last-minute change. You took out The Evil Dead, one of the most famous horror movies of all time, one of the most, iconic horror movies of all time, to talk about 2021's Malignant, directed by James Wan. Zack, the floor is yours. This is your baby in Monstober. What are we doing here?
Oh, God, Rob. Okay, first I want it to be said that every Monstober, it goes through multiple draft iterations. As Rob says, this is not really a substitute. It's me just changing the game plan very late. Like, this is an audible, more or less. That's what this is. No, Evil Dead, I want to talk about that, but a lot of that had to do with the fact that, as you've heard previously in the Fort year. Oh, geez. In Monstober so far that Rob came to New York. This is evidently being recorded after all that.
Oh, yes, that's a good point. The audio quality for this episode will be vastly better than the rest of Monstober.
But no, so I already warned Rob about this. I want to apologize in advance for making everybody suffer through the Candyman episode. What we're going to have in this discussion, what we're able to extract from Malignant, is what I wanted during both the Candyman as a movie and a discussion.
Okay.
And that's why, because I guess this is context time. We actually saw a preview for this in front of Candyman 2021. And Rob's comment was, and I quote, "This is the movie YouTube keeps telling me I need to see."
Yes.
End quote. And the trailer for this, which we'll definitely delve into the marketing of this because I think that plays a major cornerstone in just discussing this film, looked, oh God, very bland, very boilerplate, very safe. And so any other type of horror movie that's released this time of year, we discarded it. It wasn't until, I want to say, the Thursday night or Friday when Rob and I recorded the Scary Tales episode, Turnstile Moment, that I saw some of the reviews for this because the review embargo for this was very, very late, something like hours before the film debuted on HBO Max. And the reviews were oh, James Wan made oh God, I don't even know what the correct terminology would be, but he made a masterpiece of just schlock. And I'm okay, James Wan is a very prolific filmmaker. He's done everything from Saw to The Conjuring, to Fast and Furious 7, to Aquaman. I'm what does that even mean? He did all this stuff. And I'm whatever. So after Rob left, after I saw Rob in New York, I kind of sat on it for a couple of days and I kept reading more and more stuff about how I saw a friend of the show, Sleepy Skunk from our Alita Battle Angel episode was to everyone who bought a ticket to Aquaman and made that $1 billion movie, thank you. And I'm oh my God, Louis Sleepy Skunk is one of the most cynical, jaded people when it comes to movies. I'm if he's appreciative of a movie, it must be noteworthy. Then I watched like the first 15 minutes of the Red Letter Media review of Malignant, where they kind of gave away what was happening in the movie. And I'm like, okay, I cannot watch any more of this. Like, I just shut it down. And that weekend at the Hyde Park Drive-In, as Rob knows, they were doing a double feature of Malignant and The Shining. And I'm like, well, God damn it. I guess I'm going to the drive-in, even though I kind of hate the drive-in. And I saw this at the drive-in last weekend, or well, a week ago, and I just had the time of my life watching this. And I was like, that night, I was just obsessed with this film. Like, I sent Rob a message, Rob, at like 4 in the morning? Well, 4 in the morning my time.
There was a really weird timestamp of when I got a text from Zack with a YouTube link, and the YouTube link turned out to be him speaking to me.
That's the thing. And so, like, I sent Rob a message. I bought a Malignant poster off eBay.
Yep.
I was enthralled. But we'll definitely get into more specific thoughts about this film, but that's the context.
Okay.
And at that point, I was, again, like I told, the joke with Monstober is not locked in stone until Rob is done editing it. Because I don't even say editing until it's uploaded to Podbean.
Yeah.
Because there's always a possibility that I want to just change something. I am not decisive at all when it comes to Monstober.
So it sounds like Zack,
oh.
what you're saying is that, you saw this movie and you had such a reaction to it that you demanded we talk about it. Right?
Yes.
Okay.
And plus it was the idea too. It even goes back to with LaShawn, we talked about Jeepers Creepers and also in the others discussion, and where I was like, God damn it, like I wish I could have had LaShawn on for this.
Yeah, I don't know if LaShawn had listened to that
on
episode, but there's an episode in the last few months where we discuss a horror movie called The Others, and at some point Zack goes, after, being angry and exhausted with me talking about horror, he goes, I wish I knew what LaShawn thought about this. So Zack clearly holds LaShawn as the horror aficionado of us. But I want to just, branch off of what you said, Zack. My context is, this is a movie I saw YouTube advertise me a bunch. There was a long time that I thought this movie was a Shudder original. And eventually, when I learned it was not, it was going to be an HBO/theatrical release, I still had no interest in seeing it because the advertisement basically made me think, oh, is that like that Fringe episode? Because the advertising for this movie, Malignant, was basically like a girl has an imaginary friend and she starts seeing visions of murder, which is exactly a Fringe episode. I never would have watched this movie if it were not for Zack after, all this time going, hey, we should discuss this on the podcast. Or not we should, we have to. He put his foot down and took control of this podcast. So that's my context. And I don't want to give any of our thoughts yet on what we think about this movie. Because, LaShawn, I have to ask you, what is your context? Did you know about this movie before I reached out to you about this guest spot? Or was this something that you just was thrown your way?
So I had no idea what this movie was because
Okay.
I'm spoiled and I have YouTube Premium, so I don't get ads. And so
Nice. That's a good flex right there.
Funny enough, I was reading some comments on TikTok the other day. Don't ask about TikTok, but I realized that there are people in this world that don't watch movie trailers, and ironically enough, I was one of those people. I watched a movie for the first time without seeing the trailer. So I was actually just trying to watch the trailer as we speak. And I had no idea what this movie was, but I'm glad that I found it.
Oh, okay. Right on. Well, I guess then, Zack, unless there's anything else you want to say, should we say right now, spoiler alert? Was there any other general thoughts you wanted to give? Or
Spoiler alert. But okay, can we just go around and say whether we recommend the film before we give anything away?
What do you mean by recommend? That's a really important question for me.
I know, Rob. It's the idea that I know we have our questions at the end, but this is also a new release that I think you would agree with me. You want to go into as blind as possible, or are you going to dispute that?
I kind of want to start by going around the room saying we would give it a positive or negative review.
That's fine. Review or rating, like as in like thumbs up, thumbs down.
Rating, I guess. If you want to say thumbs up, thumbs down, rating, review will be more detailed. So rating, yeah. Because I know Zach's thoughts. So Zach, you can start.
Okay, I guess spoiler alert. Please don't listen. If you haven't seen this movie, if you're even slightly inclined to watch it, please stop listening. I beg you. I know Rob hates it when I do that, but I'm doing it anyway. I think this is I watched this movie. It was at the drive-in. I couldn't wait to watch what dummies' reactions were going to be to this. And to the left of me in the drive-in, I had a bunch of they had to be like people, college kids, and like I talked to the person next to me like that was stupid. And my response was, not all masterpieces are 10s out of 10.
Okay, interesting. LaShawn, you said that you saw this, you learned about it and watched it basically all at once. What do you think? Positive or negative? Good or bad? What's your rating?
So my quick answer to that would be I actually thought it was well done and could have been better, but I think the premise of it and the delivery of it, I would say a solid 85% is what I'd give it. B+.
Yes.
Okay. Well, I guess that makes me the dissenter. I thought this movie was garbage.
No,
I was
Rob,
I was so against this movie. I thought it was garbage. And when I say garbage, I not in the sense that I hated it. I think it was garbage in the sense of pure down the line superficial bullshit. Like, this was a waste of a movie.
Rob.
And I want to get into that. I want to get into that about why I think that. But I knew.
Please don't. Have you learned nothing in almost 4 years of this podcast?
This movie.
Going right back to Men, Women, and Children.
This movie is dumb Rob. And thinks that its audience is dumber.
No, it doesn't. It's oh my God,
this movie
Rob,
is stupid and stupid on top of stupid. I could not get behind this.
That's the point, Rob. That's the point.
I don't think that's the point. Zach knows if stupid's the point, I can pick it out. This is not the point. This is stupid beyond stupid. So, okay, LaShawn, welcome to this contentious discussion.
Rob,
I kind of knew this was going to happen.
I hate you so much. I hate you, Rob. I hate you so much. I hate you so much, Rob.
So now that this is out there, now that this has been all put in the ether with the three of us, Zach, I still think you should lead this discussion because my questions come from, why is this something that you like? So I would love for you to describe, well, what is the instantiation of us discussing this on Cinemodities? Because like we said, this was you watched it, you said we need to discuss it, and you pushed out The Evil Dead for this, which is an objectively phenomenal movie.
Oh my God, Rob, do we have to go back to what the point of this podcast is?
I think we've established we both have different ideas for this podcast.
Yes, but in 4 years, almost 4 years, we have not made any ground. Okay, Rob, this is everything I want out of a movie. This is schlock played straight, and this is gonna be Men, Women, and Children again. That's what I think is so frustrating.
I don't know. So one thing I want to track down, not to get involved with your overture that you're about to give. One thing I want to track down is if it's played straight. I don't know if it's played straight.
He's going to try to be he's going to try to be the academic intellectual of this. That's how he's trying to frame this. I don't want you to buy into it. I can see this is schlock garbage. Folks, I know now what he's going to try to do, and I'm going to warn you against it.
I think LaShawn is getting the idea of why he's here. LaShawn is like, I had to be the mediator to this.
I'm so frustrated with you, Rob, right now.
Numbers. I know Rob's got those budget numbers.
It's a $40 million budget. That's why I've read.
It's a lot of money.
Okay.
It's a lot of money for fucking nothing.
Yeah.
Thank you, LaShawn. He's gonna be the voice of reason in this episode, Rob.
Let's start there. Let's start there. Zach, here's my big question. That when you pitched this, you were like, before I watched it, you said to me, you got to watch Malignant. We're going to talk about it. HBO Max, that type of stuff. I could find it, no problem. I watched it, and I kind of said, like, what am I missing? What ironic thing am I missing that Zach is laughing at? Because, Zach, if you honestly like this movie, I want to say this right off the bat, if you like this movie for its movie qualities, then hell, you should subscribe to Hulu and Amazon Prime and watch every single fucking Blumhouse movie that's been straight to streaming service. This is no different than any of them. This is just as goofy and stupid and tonally inconsistent as any of those. That's what I'm saying, Zach, that you've blown me away that you like these movies. Because we've done 4 Welcome to the Blumhouse movies on the Cinemodities Patreon. Zach has not been involved with that because we thought Zach would be like, that's below me. But apparently, Zach, go back and watch them. You would love them if you loved this movie. They're on the same level.
Once again, folks, he's trying to frame the debate by belittling me. Please don't buy into this shtick. Let the movie speak on its own merits. He can't argue against the movie's merits. He's taking shots at me. This is called ad hominem. It's a logical fallacy. Don't buy into his shtick. Remember, Rob, I'm prepared for 4 years worth of men, women, and children. I've been ready for this. I'm goddamn Batman.
That's fine, and we should get into it with Malignant because I can tell you exactly why. I'm not like gaslighting you or anything. This is a cookie cutter story beyond all cookie cutter stories.
Okay. Let's introduce how this movie begins. This movie begins with, like, speaking of Evil Dead, a Sam Raimi-esque opening where you have like people being like comically thrown out of like an operating room, and it's like, we already tried buzzing it 3 times with electric and it wouldn't work. And you have all this.
My note on that scene, which I think you'll appreciate, Zach, which I was totally on board for that scene. That this whole cold open. The movie seriously hits the ground running, as does the camera, because it starts with walk and talk. It's all exposition from down low angles about Gabriel the monster, who's, I think, drinking electricity, is what they say?
Something like that.
What's crazy about that is that was 1993, and that took me by surprise. I was like, usually in horror movies, they're flashing back to like 60s, 70s, 80s, you know, all that stuff. But now we're old enough that 93 is like a flashback time.
Yeah, that is great. Absolutely. So I'm with you, Zach. I think LaShawn as well. That whole first scene is great, right?
But that is framing the rest of the film. Like, that's okay. This is the thing. Why I appreciate this movie. Do I think this is an objectively good film? Is this The Shining? No. Like, once again, this is a men, women, and children level debate of Rob's like, oh, I find this movie offensive. And I'm like, I agree. That's why it is great. That's the thing. James, I guess this is the thing where I don't know why how this movie came to pass. Because I went to, again, between Red Letter Media and just my own research, if you look at the co-story credits of this film, it's James Wan and at the time his girlfriend, now his wife, who plays like crime scene investigator girl with like the giant glasses, who's like probably the only character to survive the Gabriel onslaught at the end. And I think they just made this film as a lark. It's like James Wan, this is the definition of a blank check movie, in that he made the studio a $1 billion film that was probably forecasted, probably best case scenario, $750 million.
Yeah.
And they said,
Aquaman.
here you go.
Yeah.
It's the idea of one for us, one for you. So he's the master of contemporary horror between Saw, Insidious, Conjuring. And they said, here's a blank check. Here you go.
Well, that's my big question is when you know that James Wan is this creator of all these horror franchises that you've said to us, Zach, you don't like. Why is this different?
I know, and that because it's mocking those films. This is a film that's supposed to be like a spooky house movie. Rob, how many establishing shots do we get of this house that it's comical? Like, every single shot is lit from behind, and it has a gratuitous amount of fog. And then we have moments in the film where we see the exterior of this house, and the interior does not match it at all. In the sense that, like, the interior is 3 times larger than the exterior allows it to be. It's Cinemati's level restaurant of like exterior versus interior.
Yes, but you're not wrong. I have the note that I dig that this movie uses spooky Goosebumps looking houses as establishing shots. So I'm with you there, but I feel like it gets too silly. This movie gets too silly and goofy, I think. That's
the thing. I think James, like, this is why I think this film is, like I said, Rob, not all masterpieces are a 10 out of 10. This is James Wan mocking the films that led to his having a career. This is him saying, oh, you want a spooky supernatural movie, I'm going to literally turn that on itself and mock the, as you love the word, Rob, tropes. Everything about this movie is just like, it's taking those normal tropes and themes and it's just mocking them to the point where like we have these moments, like the idea of having somebody trapped in an attic and it's like, oh, like, or a spooky attic with a giant industrial fan that there's no way can fit inside that house. And then we have the character fall through the ceiling that's like apparently 10, 20 feet tall.
That's a great
in prior
moment.
shots,
Yeah.
the ceiling is maybe 7 or 8 feet tall. James Wan is not a novice. This isn't like when you said like, oh, Zack, if you like garbage, there's all this garbage on Hulu. Yeah, the people who direct the garbage on Hulu are dime a dozen filmmakers in quotation marks. James Wan is a master at the cinematic craft. This is the same guy who took Furious 7 halfway through production where Paul Walker dies and was able to, never mind keep the film cohesive, yet give it one of the most picturesque endings in cinematic history, where he didn't just simply give a good ending, he gave an ending that everybody, think about it, Paul Walker died from a car accident where he was known for being one of the main characters in a franchise where all you do is race dangerous, like, well, I'm not dangerous, but just like fast cars at like dangerous levels. And he was, and probably LaShawn probably knows, I don't know, LaShawn, I don't mean to project onto you, but I imagine you have some familiarity with the Fast and Furious franchise.
Zack, I understand the points you're making, and I think it's cheap
this
that
is
you are referring to the Fast and the Furious franchise because we have LaShawn here, but you're making good points that I have thoughts on.
James Wan isn't a novice. That's the point. This
okay.
is not somebody who just stumbled like off of YouTube and was like, I'm making a movie, derp.
But that is something I want to get at more. But I have to throw it over to LaShawn. LaShawn, we have you here as our almost like arbiter of horror. Like, you know, Zack and I have come to think of you as, you know, you are the tiebreaker of horror between us. So since you knew nothing about this movie and you went into it, you watched it, what are your thoughts? You know, what do you think about what we said so far? Throw it all at us.
So I guess my first thing is I'm not seeing this, I guess, the humor in any of this. I feel like this movie was like, it unfolded very well. And I will say the flashback, you know, like the VHS tape, stuff like that, it was really cheesy, of course. But I feel like they used it really well. Just to tie everything together and fill in the blanks, because, you know, in most horror movies, someone always goes researching or to a library and then they discover someone died in their house and that's how it all unfolds. But this way, with the VHS tapes, I was like, you know what? I kind of like this. It gives you that whole detective feeling. And I don't know, I just really didn't find it too funny. And I thought it was well done with how they unfolded the whole story, because even in that first scene, you don't really pick up on everything going on. And so for me, I didn't even realize that Gabriel was a part of her or any of that stuff. I just was like, oh my God, there's so much happening, that going back and thinking about some of the things you guys are saying, I'm like, oh wow, I didn't realize, you know, all these little hidden things, which I don't think most people will. But I thought it was well done as far as how they told the story.
That is not, oh God. LaShawn, okay, I don't know where to begin with that, because this is, like I said, I looked at this entirely as schlock, and maybe because I knew I had a vague idea what was going to happen. So like I went in conceding that. I thought, okay, and again, LaShawn, you don't understand the men, women, and children reference, but like this is men, women, and children level to me, Rob.
Basically, when Zack says men, women, and children, he means that when Zack and I disagree on a movie where he has any thought on it, and my response is, this is so offensive it shouldn't exist.
That's okay, but the point being is that this is, everything about this movie is meant to be schlocky, and it's tongue-in-cheek played extremely straight. It's none of that thing of, look at how crazy this is. It's not self-referential. It never winks into the camera. That's what I loved about this. And that's the thing. Like, throughout this entire, I'd say outside of probably the second half of the first act and the first half of the second act, I was just laughing hysterically through this movie. Like, I'm probably tipping my hand a little too much too soon. But, like, there's a point in this, like LaShawn referenced, where we see, like, a VHS tape, and we see little Madison on a kitty like light up neon telephone as we hear her talking to like her like disembodied like conjoined twin demon, and it's like, Madison, what are you doing? And she just awkwardly hangs up the phone, and it might have been the funniest thing I've ever seen in my life. Like it's just everything about this is comical to me. Like I didn't take it seriously. Like that's the thing. Like it's schlock in a way that like Friday the 13th Part 12 is schlock, and that it's being taken seriously, and that's what I love. This is why, like we discussed either a week before this or a week after this, Rob's going to decide the episode order. It's that maybe Rob, maybe put this as the third week of Monstober for that reference to or that point to be made. That's the thing. And that's why like I appreciate James Wan so much after watching this. Like I've said, like I think Fast and Furious 7 works very well considering the amount like the production nightmare he had with that. Aquaman, I remember when that movie came out, we were doing cinemati's for almost a year at that point. I remember telling Rob, I'm like, Rob, this movie's literally like insane. Like you have, Julie Andrews voicing like a sea monster during the climax.
Yeah, she's like the Kraken or something, right?
Exactly. Like Jason Momoa, I'm sorry, James Wan made a phone call and he's like, Julie Andrews, like, would you mind being the voice of like the Kraken in Aquaman? And he somehow talked her into it. God bless him for that. And I think, and that's the thing, though, like, I remember back in the early days of James Wan, like, Insidious, Saw, and people thought he was just, like, larger-than-life persona. I'm like, I don't get it. Like, Saw is built on, like, one premise. And I never, like, that never connected with me. Not to detract anything from the film, but it just never clicked with me. And then even Insidious, I'm like, this is just, like, Poltergeist for a new generation. And even with The Conjuring, how many times have I made fun of The Conjuring on this podcast?
Yeah.
It's that notion that like James Wan is able to make fun of the genre that is the foundation of his success, and he was able to get a $40 million budget from a studio to do it. And I think that's where I laud this film, is that like this is so goofy. Like we literally have a sequence where our main character is like put like in a comically large holding cell with just we have lesbian Butch, and we have 70s Sister Mama.
See, everything you're mentioning is in the last act, though. That's my issue.
No.
It's like everything before that third act, where it's revealed that there's a conjoined twin in her brain, is just boring. That's why I dislike this movie so much. The whole first lead up of I'm seeing people getting murdered is just an old episode of Fringe / The X-Files, where it's like, yeah, I know what's going on. Just can we get something to happen?
I concede that a lot of the setup is boilerplate, but
all of the setup, yes, before the last 40 minutes, yeah.
I disagree. In the first 15 minutes of this movie, you get a Sam Raimi-esque opening. On top of that, you have like pregnant woman abuse, where we have a man literally like punches pregnant wife into a wall, which is just like, of all the ways to have a pregnant woman or like any woman get an injury, that is okay. I'm gonna sound horrible for saying this. That is absurd, and that's what makes it comical. Like, you could very easily had her slip on something. Think about it. There's a million different ways to incur an injury to the back of one's skull. And yet they had to have that injury come in the form of a man saying, like, all these weird lines of dialogue. They're just so jarring and unnerving of, like, why are you pregnant again? I see that you're pregnant again, and all this. Like, he's just comically sitting on a bed watching a wrestling match, and she just walks in, she just shuts the TV off arbitrarily, and he punches her like, what?
See,
practically
everything you're saying, I agree with, but here's my big thought about it, is that why does this deserve any, like, acclaim or success or us saying, oh, it's so good, when literally we could have found a random VHS from late 1980s, early 1990s, put it in and seen this exact same thing. It's like James Wan is making a movie from 30 years ago. Why does that deserve any acclaim right now?
I really don't feel like you could put in a VHS from that time and get something like this. That's where I feel like I like this, because it's very modern and it takes a different direction than what you are used to. And all the things that Zack said, those are all cliche horror movie things. You know, you have to have stupid people. And, like, I think this movie is great because the dialogue, so it is weird, but it's very like, I guess it just sets the tone for this whole movie of like nothing's right. Everything just seems off. Like this whole movie, the detectives, the relationship with the girls and the detectives, the relationship between the cops, like everything just feels very weird through this whole movie. And I feel like the dialogue set it up perfectly for that. You're just always like, what is going on? Why is everyone so uneasy?
Okay, to go back to Rob's comment, James Wan has said in an interview that, or I think it would be not an interview, but like something on social media he posted. He goes, "I wanted to make a movie you would find like in the back of a VHS store 30 years ago." He did say that.
Well, I have to disagree with you, LaShawn, on what you said. That I find this to be the least modern thing I've seen in a while. Like this feels 30 years old to me.
It's
and I think that's because of the filming, though. I feel like they could have taken the story and had someone, better CGI, better makeup, and just better acting, like just overall. I feel like that's the three things that killed this for me and why I didn't give it a better rating, because I thought the story was great. And I'm like, oh, this is awesome. And even writing in that domestic abuse situation, where it's like, yeah, she could have tripped or any of that stuff. But I feel like that's a thing. Like, you're just mad in a situation, you react. So I feel like how they wrote that in, it just all plays in together. And none of it seems very cheesy to me, just very normal horror stuff. And I guess I don't laugh at those things in the way that you guys do.
Okay. So I know what you're saying, but here, just to take that and, add some other points, I said earlier, I think this movie is stupid, and it thinks its audience is stupider. I hated the fact that in the third act of this movie, they felt the need to say, like characters said directly to the camera, like, oh, Gabriel was awakened when your head was smashed by your abusive boyfriend. The reason you had multiple miscarriages is because your conjoined twin was eating them to gain strength. I felt that was clearly telegraphed throughout me watching the movie, and then they were like, well, no, our audience is stupid. We need to say that to them. Like, this movie treats us as idiots. That's why I hated it. One of the reasons I hated it.
But that's typical horror movie stuff, though. Oh my God, I think someone's outside.
You're not wrong.
Like, yeah,
that's not atypical, but that's one of the reasons I hate horror, though.
Fair. That's fair.
Okay. God, Rob. So, okay, Rob, why is this not enjoyable as schlock, yet Friday the 13th Part 12 is enjoyable as schlock, in your opinion?
I think because I'm going into Friday the 13th Part 12 with the expectation of schlock murder. When I go into a new horror movie, an independent property from somebody who's just created horror franchises, I'm expecting something other than a Blumhouse / Goosebumps movie, and that's what this was.
So, Rob, you don't think there's any merit in the fact of a filmmaker who's world-renowned mocking the foundation that he started off with? You think there's, for a director to basically knowingly make a schlock film, and like you said, it's kind of the idea of passing off a dog turd as a chocolate truffle to mass audiences with a $40 million budget. You don't think that's noteworthy at all?
See, no, when you put it that way, that's different, because I did not see this as a satire at all. There's no way. I thought this was totally serious, just through the line, neutral, useless horror movie. There is no way, shape, or form on the watch that I went through I got satire. I would like to watch it again with this notion, but I did not get that at all on my viewing. I did not think it was James Wan making fun of the genre, period. I thought he was playing into the genre to a detriment.
Well, okay.
That's what I got from
this is where I think the idea of a communal viewing alters perception of a film. Because as I said, Rachel and I watched this at the drive-in, and all I did was howl at this. Like, whether it be the mom, at that point we don't know that she's the mom character.
Yeah.
We have the mother character in the underground Seattle, and she hears she turns all the lights off. Then she hears the clanging in the distance, and then she awkwardly is trying fumbling trying to connect the extension cords back together. And the whole time I'm just laughing hysterically because that's not going to stop whatever ghoul or demon is in the dark. I'm like, oh, this is just goofy. She's fumbling trying to do something that's going to have no impact on the preservation of her life. And I found that insanely comical. Like, we have the moment where she's strung up in the attic, and I'm like, oh, she's basically being crucified. There's no way she could live through this. She's literally like a crucifix. I'm like, stuff like that, where like I was just laughing at just how like dumb and schlocky it was. And like, again, I agree with you, Rob. If this was a Blumhouse Hulu dump,
yeah,
I would agree with you. It's the fact this is coming from someone who understands not just the horror genre, but understands how to make a big budget movie in a way nobody else possibly.
I think this is exactly where my question lies for you, is that when you say, you know, this is coming from someone who understands the genre, isn't it what we know of your thoughts on The Conjuring and the Insidious universes? You don't like those, Zach? That's why I'm surprised you like this movie.
But The Conjuring and Insidious are supernatural, quasi poltergeist movies. This is a creature feature. It doesn't tip its hand until about 2/3 the way through. And even when we first get our like full shot of Gabriel, and it's like this stupid looking little like skeleton creature with T-Rex arms.
Well, the puppet on the back of the girl is the best part of the movie. Absolutely.
It's the funniest. Okay. This is the part. Maybe this is my own sense of humor, and maybe I am blending my projection onto the film itself. It's like anything else in life. If you find a joke funny, it's gonna be impossible to explain to somebody why you think it's funny when they don't laugh. But like I said, I cannot remember the last time I laughed as hard at a movie as at the moment we're watching the videotape footage of quasi child Madison, it's the dad like awkwardly fumbling with the camera, and it's Christmas time, and she's in front of the Christmas tree on like the glow in the dark like kitty phone, awkwardly talking to the demon, and then the like Madison, and she like awkwardly embarrassingly hangs up the phone like, who are you talking to? Nobody, Dad. And I was just like, it was this level of just schlock where I'm like, this is eliciting humor. There's nothing, oh God, forget about scary. There's nothing suspenseful or anything like that. Everything about this reminded me of a schlock creature feature. This movie reminded me more of like a trauma film. And that's the thing. Like, as somebody who loves schlock, again, Rob, how many times have I told you I hate that notion of look at how crazy this is?
Oh yeah, absolutely, yeah.
If you want to look at my opinion, this is my own take on this. You have two ways of doing schlock in contemporary horror. You have the James Gunn Slither way of, oh look, here's what's her name? Elizabeth Banks. Look, she's super bloated with like worm babies. Isn't this crazy? Yuck, 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 elbowing the audience. And then you have the James Wan Malignant way, which is a very specific lens of, oh, we have butch lesbian and 70s mama kicking this woman arbitrarily in a comically large holding cell. That's the part where I'm just like, it's absurd. And I'm not sure how much of the Red Letter Media review of this you delved into, Rob, but it's that level of just zero. It's like Jay brings up Freddy Got Fingered in that it feels like a director that has a lot of money that's just saying, you know what, not that I don't care, but just I am going to take this money and literally point it right at the studio and do like a Bugs Bunny, Elmer Fudd level. Just I'm going to watch the shotgun like buck blow up in their face. And I think, and if you look at the context of this movie, the studio review embargo, I think, didn't drop until like very, very late Thursday night. Like, the studio didn't know what to make of this movie. Because I went back and rewatched all the trailers for this in preparation for this recording. And the trailers didn't know, the marketing team did not know what to make of this film. So they sold it as a supernatural thriller ?
Yeah, like I mentioned before, the from what I got from the trailers, it was like that Fringe episode where, you know, somebody's seeing other people commit murders, that type of thing.
Yes.
So now with that, Yeah, with that all being said, with all that, what we thought about it, what it turns out to be, LaShawn, I want to know, are you getting this sense of goofiness that I think Zack is portraying for us in his description? Is that how you felt about this movie?
So, no, not at all. And I thought the tiny little bits of humor that were sprinkled in, they were obviously deliberate. They were meant to make you giggle a little bit, but it didn't take away from the thriller part of it for me. So I got a little bit of, psychological thriller. I got a little bit of the home invasion thing, a little bit of the creatures. I feel like it just captured a little tiny bit of each of those realms, the supernatural thing, because that's what it starts off as. You think it is supernatural, but then it rolls into something else, and then it rolls into a monster, and then it's like, wait, what is all going on? And then it even ends back as a psychological thriller of, is she really seeing what she thinks she's seeing or what Gabriel wants her to see? And for me, I guess it was more entertaining. I didn't go as deep as, Zack sounding like he went. But for me, just pure entertainment, I thought that it kept me asking questions. It did unfold in a way that, was kind of annoying, where the characters were telling you what was going on. But I also feel like at this day and age, that there are people that won't put those pieces together like we will. And they do that a lot in horror movies. So I might be a little bit desensitized to it. And I'm not insulted by any means that the characters are like, oh, maybe we should go do this, or maybe we should go do that, or body in the coffin, maybe it's alive and walking around. It's like, well, yes, like I could figure those things out myself, but until it actually happens, you don't know. And that last scene Zack was talking about with the jail cell, I thought that was hilarious, but I thought it was really cool.
Thank you.
I was like, okay, she's in a bad situation. She's in a bad situation, and they were explaining, oh, Gabriel shows up when one person's weak. Like, they just wrote it in a way that was kind of easy to pick out, but it unfolded so well for me that I'm not mad at this. I thought this was so entertaining.
See, that's like literally when the Gabriel comes out in the jail cell till the end of the movie, that's where I'm like, I'm totally against this. I can't stand it. This is the dumbest shit I've ever seen.
You know what this is, Rob? This is there you go. Thank you, Sean, because that is like the finishing move to end all finishing moves. It's like, how are you taking out? Chair to the back, flung across the room. Rob, I think I finally figured out the issue of this.
Okay,
like this is maybe the bookends of Men, Women, and Children. In that, I think it comes
after
down
3.5 years, we're putting it to rest.
No, we're never putting that to rest.
Okay.
I still no, but this is my enlightenment in the Men, Women, and Children dilemma. Is that I have to? I know Rob's answer, but LaShawn, did you watch this movie with anybody, or was it a solo experience?
This one was solo.
Okay. And Rob, I would assume you did not invite this wasn't a haircutting party. You didn't invite the entire gang over.
Yeah, this is totally solo. Absolutely.
Okay. I think, Rob, if this was this same level, like if we, again, and this is the thing, I apologized already. I'm going to apologize again. If I was able to wrangle up Jeremy and Rachel for this opening night, I think Rob would have 100. Like I said, I think that's what happened with this. Rob went into this with his stoic academia hat on, and it was a little too tight, and it cut off the circulation to his fun-loving part of the brain. And I think he couldn't see the forest through the trees. And I think, and like I said, again, if I were to watch this without, like, that's why it's weird. Like, when I tell Rob not to look into anything, I know it's both a blessing and a curse. But it's the idea of, I think if Rob and I were sitting in a theater with a couple other people, we would have been cackling hysterically at this, because like when people like laughter is something you feed off others with.
Well, sure.
It's very, and I think if we sat in a theater with a bunch of normies, like I said, that's why I'm so mad. I think if we, instead of going to stupid Six Flags and seeing this stupid Candyman 2021 movie,
Zack and I had a great time at Six Flags. LaShawn, don't think otherwise. We had a fun time together.
No, I want to visit. You know what my snack's going to be for this? I want to go to the alternate reality where we saw this opening night on September 11th or 10th. That's my problem.
I will say, though, Zach, everything you've explained, I would think that you don't like this movie.
Exactly.
It sounds like. But the thing is, the things that you're saying that you don't like, you like because you think that it's done in a way that it's hard to explain what it is
Well,
that I'm hearing.
Okay. Let me try to answer your question. James Wan, like I said, currently in Hollywood, there is not I would say if he's not the most successful filmmaker in blockbuster cinema right now, he's top 3. He just is. Like, whether it be, like I said, LaShawn, I don't mean to assume, but like I would imagine you've seen every Fast and Furious movie. Am I wrong?
Everything but the last one. Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. That movie doesn't matter. It doesn't. I saw that movie. I was horribly bored by it. Think about Furious 7. You remember, obviously, when Paul Walker died in the car accident in, November 2013. And there was that big issue of like, oh God, like he's like the face of a movie franchise that's about racing fast cars. How are they going to explain this character's disappearance from the franchise after this? There was a lot of talk back in like November, December 2013, even boiling over to 2014. Is Universal Studios just going to throw out the entire film and just write it off? Like, how are they going to salvage this? And this was James Wan's first time jumping from horror to a different genre, never mind having to deal with this. And never mind, he didn't just make a cohesive film out of it. He stuck the landing to the point where like it's the most highest grossing film of that franchise.
I think some people would consider that a horror movie,
yeah.
just so you know.
But
Good,
that makes sense. The only thing is, this movie and what you're saying, like, yes, his reputation is amazing, and I get that part. I respect everything you're saying. However, with this movie, I don't think cinematically it was amazing. I think the story is what I loved, and I feel like if they would have had someone else maybe direct some of these scenes that could have been better. They were just, even Gabriel, I feel like when we finally see him, that part's well done. But in the beginning, it's so cheesy that it's like, oh, this is the monster, like this little thing, like, but it's also creepy because it's something coming out of another person's body. And that's just like, I think that's what they were hoping for, would get the point of cross of like, this is terrifying. But without a great monster, you kind of lose people a little bit. And I feel like that's where I started backing off a little bit from this one, was those things, or
Yes.
the setting. You have this random lady in the tunnels, but then she says something like, oh, we're closed, and it's like, why would you say that? But it's like, I'm over here like, oh, this is typical horror movie, that's just what they do.
But that's the thing though, where again, LaShawn, I don't think I'm arguing with you, because I think you're taking the movie much more at face value. Rob is what do you want to say to this? He is desensitized to my shenanigans.
Oh, totally. I mean, I think especially because from you, Zack, and from a lot of the other people I've read online about, that they talk about this movie being crazy because of that third act reveal, that it's a conjoined twin thing.
But
that's not crazy. That's nowhere near crazy.
I know, Rob, but I think you're taking this like literally. It's that old it's the adage of, you're taking it literally, but you're not taking it seriously. And that, like, when people say the third act is crazy, I don't think they're taking this as like, oh, this is like revolutionary. I think they're looking at this as,
I don't understand why. Like, Rob, you're saying that it's not, but I guess I'm not understanding why it's not. How often do you see a Parasite or any of that? Like, there are movies, that exist, but this isn't common ground.
Well, when this is to me, this is a conjoined twin story. They just happen to be conjoined at the brain. And if you have them conjoined at the brain, how does it work? They have to be back to back. I have never seen a brain conjoined twin story before, but I've seen many conjoined twin stories. And that's the issue that I have, is that there's nothing new about this, where it's like, oh, if you have two minds inhabiting one body, what do you do with that? Like, The X-Files has a great conjoined twin episode. Warehouse 13 has a conjoined twin episode. The Fringe episode that I mentioned. The movie Basket Case that I know I've talked to Zack before about. Like, this is nothing new to me. That's why I say it's like another TV movie or a Blumhouse movie. They're just pumping out a horror concept. I don't find it novel at all.
But this is the thing, Rob. I think it's the context of this. You have James Wan, who's known as the supernatural poltergeist filmmaker, and you have a movie that, like you said, Rob, when we watched the trailer for this in front of Candyman 2021, we kind of just rolled our eyes at it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's the idea that this was a movie that was sold as another Insidious, another Conjuring, except it wasn't that. It was a wolf in sheep's clothing.
Well, that's my question.
It was
I have not
goofy
seen
feature.
the Insidious or Conjuring movies. Is this not like them?
No,
That's my thing.
Not even close. LaShawn, please, I would imagine you've seen one of those at least.
All of the above, yeah.
Okay. Can you please elaborate Mr. Rob?
Is this different from those movies?
Yes, significantly. And I will
shit.
Yes.
Okay, literally, I'm learning this in real time. I did not know this.
I don't love the Poltergeist movies. There's another movie that's very similar to this one, where it starts off and you do think that it's a poltergeist, extra, not terrestrial, that's not the one. What's the word I'm looking for?
Supernatural, something
Supernatural.
like that. Yeah.
Thank you. It's The Boy. I don't know if you've seen that one, Zach.
The Boy, does not ring a bell, but I'm going to look into it as you continue to talk.
I've heard of it, but I haven't seen it. That's the one about the doll.
So
type
that's
of thing,
another
right?
movie. Yeah, exactly. It's very similar to this one where you think that this doll has powers. Come to find out, doll does not have powers. There's a whole backstory to this house and what's going on. And I thought that movie was amazing, but it was not well received by a lot of people because they wanted it to be supernatural. A lot of people, when it comes down to it's a human thing or it's something that could be kind of realistic, they kind of lose that thrill for them. And for me, I guess I just don't love supernatural. And that's why I like this one, because it is that, does someone have an evil twin telling them to do bad things? And it's like, she doesn't know that her body is doing things that, she's over here reporting things to the police, but she doesn't realize that she did them. And I think that's like terrifying and amazing. And that's why I love this movie, because I feel like that is more of the whole psychological thrillers that I like. And even when it becomes pretty slasher at the end, I think that still gives people what they want. People like that breaking bones in weird places and all of that stuff. I feel like this movie threw a little bit of everything out there. And I was like, for me, it hit most of them.
My big question then becomes, is this movie just its last act with the crazy movements of the killer, of that stuff? Because that's what I've heard people talk about. That's what it seems like Zack has latched onto, what LaShawn, you just mentioned.
Okay. I want to rebut that. Like I said, I agree. This is the thing. I think I'm kind of scattershot in what I think is phenomenal about this movie.
Okay.
Like Annabelle Wallace, our protagonist. From the first shot we see her like walking up the stairs to the house, she has the clearest fake wig ever. Like I always said, the greatest wig in cinematic history was Nicolas Cage's from Drive Angry. This is This is on like the mantle to that. It's the greatest fake wig I've ever seen. Every single time she's on screen, I couldn't help but laugh hysterically because I'm like, oh, this is clearly a fake piece of hair, and I find it comical. The fact that every single time that like we see her lay her head down, there's always a giant blood stain under it when she lifts her head up. I am laughing hysterically.
I do have multiple notes about that where I'm like, oh, she's still bleeding?
Exactly. This is the thing, Rob. No, I think, again, the overall critical thesis seems to be the third act is the, quote, noteworthy part. I'm not going to argue that because that's when the movie really just goes completely off the walls. That's objective. I think we all can agree the third act is when the movie just completely goes 100% unrestrained. I think there are so many parts in this that are just hysterical to me. And that's the thing. Like where this was, like I said, this is like James Wan said in whatever social media post. I'll go dig it up and I'll send it to Rob so you can put it in the show notes if anyone really wants to go find it. Is that he said, this is a movie. I wanted to make a movie that you would find like in the back of a video rental store from 30 years ago. And as somebody who grew up going to an independent video store on top of a Blockbuster, and where I discovered A Nightmare on Elm Street for the first time. And you saw all these weird horror covers, and they were always like in the back corner away from like the new release wall. This is something I could very easily see in that area because you have those really goofy moments. And I think LaShawn said it, that like very early on in this discussion, that like, oh, when we see the hospital in the opening shot, it's like, oh, like, isn't it weird to see something that's listed as 30 years ago and it's only like 1993? And this is the thing. We see this like weird, just like, oh God, what would you call it? What's the correct term, Rob? Sanatorium?
Yeah, sanitarium. Yep.
Sanitarium, excuse me. I got the suffix wrong there. And you see this thing, and it's like LaShawn said, it's from like 1993. Yet when we see the sister go in there, like into the records room, and I love that even when she goes into this thing, like she parks on the side of a cliff, which is like, I couldn't stop laughing at that. She parks 30 inches away from a cliff. And on top of that, like she goes to the directory on the wall, and it's like, first floor, it's like first floor directory, second floor this, and it's like, oh, records, the basement. And we see her comically walk down, and we see wheelchairs from like 1860s. Like we see these like wheelchairs they have not used since the 19th century. And I'm just like that's the sort of thing that James Wan would be cognizant of. And he's like, oh, yeah, I don't care. Like, see, I'm just, and then like we see her dig, and she immediately finds the exact record box with all of her sister's records, where there's videotapes in Seattle, Washington, which is one of the most humid places in the U.S. And all these videotapes, which is one of them, like, again, Rob, you know, again, LaShawn, I don't know how much you're aware of like home video media. It would degrade immediately in that sort of human circumstances, and her and the mother are comically putting it into the VCR. And I'm just like, this is so goofy. This is so dumb. And I'm just like, and I love that, like, James Wan, and this is the part where I say where he's so prolific, he did not back into this by accident. Like, it's weird to think of this, but like, I would love to make a Room 237 level documentary on Malignant where I'm like, none of this is by accident. None of this is arbitrary. And my ultimate crux of this argument, and after this, I promise I'll shut up and I'll let you two talk, is the sequence where they're having the hypnosis sequence, where prior to this, we see Madison's house in this living room area. The roof's clearance is maybe 7-8 feet. And then as the hypnotist is walking out, we have the mother character fall through the attic, where out of nowhere, the ceiling of the living room goes from 8 feet to about 25 feet. And at that point, I'm just like, sold. I'm like, James Wan does not care. He's doing whatever he wants to get a reaction out of the audience. And he doesn't care what that's the thing about this movie. James Wan does not care what reaction he gets out of the audience as long as he gets one. And I think he's laughing at this in the sense of not like maliciously laughing at the audience. He just wanted to get a rise out of the audience. And that's where I find this like almost like this is almost a quasi exploitation film. He just wants a rise out of the audience for in LaShawn's case, where he found it genuinely thrilling at sometimes, or in my case, I'm just laughing at it. That's where I'm coming from with this. And I think this is where like I said, I'm trying to tie this into men, women, and children, in that, like, I don't think Rob's wrong. I think this movie is an honest to God mess. But I think that whereas with men, women, and children, we don't know what Jason Reitman's intent was. I think with this, in that one statement I've said now like 6 times coming from James Wan, I wanted to make a movie you would find in the back corner of a rental house from 30 years ago, I think explains why he made every decision he did. Rob might not like it, but I think you can't argue with the author's intent here. And decline of soapbox.
I don't know if I completely agree with that because of the things that made me feel this was like a TV movie, which I mentioned before. I thought this was almost like a straight to streaming or a sci-fi original movie. I mean, we get stuff, the thing that jumps out to my mind, the example that we have not mentioned yet, we've mentioned many moments of this movie, is when there's a moment where, you know, the main girl goes to the police and she explains her point of view on the whole scenario, and the police says back to her, "Wait, are you saying the killer is your imaginary friend?" And completely expected it to fade to black, like for a commercial after that line. And that's where I don't know if I have you completely, Zach. Is James Wan going for a parody of all these things and parodying many things? Because what I brought up as a commercial break almost, doesn't fit with anything else we've talked about. So I didn't get any of this goofiness. And LaShawn, I want to know, did you get any of this goofiness?
So, yeah, I was going to say, I'm with you on this. I think, Zach, you're giving him too much credit. And a lot of everything you're describing, if these same points were made about any other horror movie, it would all sound like any other horror movie, which is why, Rob is not a fan of horror movies, because of these things that you're spelling out. And, it is the obvious stuff, because for me, I feel like this was just another horror movie with a twist. But I love horror movies. I can take off my my intellectual hat and sit back and, be entertained, where I'm like, oh, you are just doing silly things. And, Rob, you kind of touched on it a lot, where you said just their interaction with the police in general, that it felt like I was watching, what's his face in Law and Order? Ice-T, Ice Cube? Which one?
Oh, Ice-T, Finn Tutuola?
Yeah, just everything with that was just hilarious. Like, when the cop is like, she's like, oh, he's showing me video. Like, I'm seeing what he's doing. He's showing them to me. And the cop's like, oh, he's sending you videos? And I'm just like, that exchange is so, it's just dumb. But also, that's what I would be saying as a cop if somebody walked in and started telling me these things. And, there's always that one blatant person that just refuses to believe the obvious. And it's that other detective where he's like, no, there's no way she did it. I don't think she's capable of this crime. And it's like, well, yeah, I mean, she's probably not in her normal human form, but when Gabriel takes over, I mean, she's a monster. Like, just all of that stuff is like, it's all cliche. And
yeah.
I think, Zach, you're giving this guy too much credit, but it's just another horror movie with its makeup. And maybe he's doing it as a joke, but it's still what people do in horror movies, so it's nothing special to me.
But I think the thing about this, like, in Rob, again, we've talked about it a lot, Russ. There hasn't been a good horror movie in 20 years. It's that notion of this is the guy made, and it's not just the fact that he made $2 billion movies. He was able to make a respectable movie while also being zany and goofy with Aquaman. Like, I know, Rob, you've never seen Aquaman, right?
No, not at all.
LaShawn, have you seen Aquaman?
No.
It's a very goofy, it's a very tongue-in-cheek movie, but not in a way that Guardians of the Galaxy is, where it's just like Chris Pratt calling Rocket Raccoon a trash panda. It's not that type of movie. It's a movie where you can have, like I said, Julie Andrews be the Kraken, and it's played 100% straight. He also, like I said, he took the Paul Walker tragedy and didn't just able to stick the landing, but made it probably one of the most cathartic endings in cinematic history.
You're not wrong, Zach. I mean, if you want to talk about whether or not James Wan is a cinemoddity, that's a different question. We're talking about Malignant, right?
But this is the thing, though. I think it comes down to author's intent. I don't think anything here is done by accident or
it's
anything.
not.
I think I think he made the closest thing you can make to an exploitation movie under the studio system. Closest thing that a studio in 2021, where you are, oh good Lord, spellbound by political correctness and Lord knows what rules and regulations, both unofficial and official, by the studio system. He made the closest thing we're ever going to get to another Sam Raimi level, like Schlockfest or Trauma Schlockfest.
I mean,
this
when you put the qualifier Schlockfest and Trauma-esque movies, then yeah, maybe I'll start to consider it. But that's one of my biggest issues with this movie, is that it's not anything special. One of my thoughts is literally, are we giving, or not, when I say we, I'm not just saying like you, LaShawn, me, or anybody else. I'm saying everybody. All the reviews I've read, are people giving this undue praise because it's been 20 years since anybody's seen a movie like this? Like, is this just getting praise because it's fresh in retrospective? Like this, like I said at the start,
Absolutely.
This is like a 90s horror movie. This would have been a VHS classic.
Okay, Rob, like I said,
you're
not
right.
every masterpiece not every film, not every masterpiece is a 10 out of 10. That's all I'm saying.
No, not every masterpiece has to be a 10 out of 10, but I'm just saying is that, is this something fresh for the ages and not for all of time? You know what I mean?
Well, if that's the case, then Rob, if everything is not breaking the mold, we should dispose of it.
Well, kind of, yeah, because if you make 17 more movies like this, I'm going to say the same thing, that this feels like it was from the 90s.
Okay, Rob, if we're going to judge it by that thing, though, that, okay, it's should we discard James and the Giant Peach because it wasn't as good as Nightmare Before Christmas? Should we? That's the thing. If we were going to judge everything by the fact that, does it hold up to the pinnacle of its genre?
I get what you're saying.
Everything out.
And no, of course not. I don't feel that way.
If that's the case, again,
no. I'm not saying that's what we do. What I'm saying is that we take this and we compare it to the things that it should be compared to. Malignant, to me, is no different than the many Hulu and Amazon Prime direct-to-video Blumhouse things, and things like The Lawnmower Man from the 90s. I'm not saying we discard anything. I'm saying we rank them appropriately.
But again,
yeah. So I think you hit it on the head, though, Rob. Because with the horror genre, it's so saturated with the same things that we hit a point. I would say probably 2010, somewhere around there. You guys probably know better than I do, where everyone was like, "What else can we do? What horror genre, or what can we do within the horror realm that has not been done?" But the thing is, it's such a limited scope where you have zombies, you have vampires, and vampires aren't even scary anymore. So you can't do vampires. Zombies are hardly scary anymore. So when you have movies like World War Z, people trying to put a spin on the typical things that you would see, that a lot of times it doesn't work because there's a big group of people that just want what they're used to. You can keep making zombie movies and people will enjoy them, but for how long? And I think we're just at that point where you have seen all these horror movie styles done, that for someone to go back and start bringing them back, like, hey, let's go back this route, in a retro kind of way, it's cool. But at the end of the day, it is just another horror movie, because that horror genre is all the same. There's only so many times you can do camera cuts. One, you can't do jump scares anymore. That's old school. So you have to do the camera cuts where you build up the intensity of a scene. Even when that guy, her husband, he's down in the kitchen, the blender kicks on and you're like, oh, this is it. This is when he dies. And then it builds up to nothing. And so they have to do that type of filming and those type of sequences to kind of build this horror tension, because people are so used to jump scares. So now it's like, there isn't a jump scare, but when? And that's when people, kind of really get into horror movies. But really, what's going to scare people nowadays? There's just nothing that hasn't been done.
That's a really neat idea of, there has to be a jump scare, but now when is the jump scare? Zack, I know you have thoughts on what was just said, right?
Well, LaShawn's wrong, but at least he's closer to how I'm thinking than you are, Rob. I think you're treating this, like I said, as the academic, in that you're grading this on a rubric of does it check the box, yes or no? And that's the wrong way to look at media, or, for lack of a better term, art. I don't want to say that word art, but at least like that sort of thing. This isn't type of movie to check off on boxes. The same way you wouldn't check off boxes on The Evil Dead or Hellraiser. And this is the thing, and this is where I agree with LaShawn, is that this is a breath of fresh air, in that in a world where we are suffocated with Conjuring. I can think about this summer we had The Conjuring 3, which was not directed by James Wan, come out on HBO Max. We are suffocated with these movies that are just so stuffy, of God, how many times have I complained about the Babadook on this podcast? It's the idea of we are so just inundated with this supernatural crap where nothing happens. It's just a dark room where something makes a loud noise. Very similarly to that sequence where we have the mother character in the Seattle Underground when she unplugs the floodlights. The idea of having a movie, and this is where I think, Rob, maybe the critics aren't explaining themselves properly, or maybe you're misinterpreting it, and that when they say this is revolutionary, they're not saying it as in like, oh, this is reinventing the wheel. I think what they're saying is it's fascinating to have a director that's known for this very tired genre of supernatural poltergeist-esque movies, poltergeist with a lowercase p, basically have a movie that's sold as that type of film, then in the third act transform itself, not even transform, but just reveal itself to be a creature feature. And I think that's the thing, is that like we haven't had a blockbuster level, like I said, God, 10-figure sized budget for this film, creature feature movie in forever. And I think that's where people are saying this is revolutionary, because James Wan was able to somehow get a major studio, Warner Brothers, to give him this money to make this type of film. And I think that's where people are claiming this is revolutionary. And this is why I keep tying this back to James Wan. Because, Rob, if you took any of those Hulu directors that you've talked about on Patreon, which I wasn't aware of, and gave me any of those names and said, could they have gone to Warner Brothers and asked for a $40 million budget to make a schlock fest, they would have been told, no, you stick to Hulu, you jerk. And I think that's where we have to appreciate this. The fact that James Wan was able to make this level of schlock, this genre fare on this scale, and it was able to get to this sort of just plateau. I think that's where, again, like I said, Rob, you know me, I'm very obsessed with the behind the scenes level of all this, how the inside baseball of how movies are made. And I think that's what delights me. No, if this was just something that just, like you said, I agree with you. This is 100% something you would see 30 years ago, and that is the intent. And I think that's the problem. You're seeing that as a detriment, whereas that was the purpose of this. Whether you dislike it is fine, but to critique it for that reason, I think, is a folly.
I think you've laid out a great, level of argument about why this movie should be respected. And I don't think LaShawn would disagree with me about that. But I don't know if that's where either of us were coming from, debating this movie, if that makes sense, right?
That's where I'm at. I agree.
But I think that's the thing, though, Rob, is that, like, you went into this with, again, grading it on a merits of does it get to this threshold? If it doesn't, it fails.
Well, yes.
And I think that was the wrong way to view this movie. Not all movies are cut from the same cloth.
I agree with you 100%. And I think, most people view movies the wrong way until they view them the right way, that type of thing. This is kind of a learning experience for both, I think myself and the rest of our audience. But that's what I want to say on this discussion as our type of review of this film. That's not what I got in the slightest about this movie. Everything you're saying makes perfect sense, Zach. You've laid out a wonderful, diatribe of what it means to understand this movie, but that is not what I gathered from it in the slightest. The thing that I gathered from it was the stuff that I've said already that's made me offended by it and thought it was so basic and simple. I thought Malignant was a common horror movie that was just playing on the tropes and not making fun of them, as you've laid out in your once again diatribe.
I think in this one, I agree with you, Zach, in how I agree with you in overall view of this, that it is well done, and there are things to love about it and to complain about. But I think I'm with Rob when it comes to the reasoning why everything that Rob sees as not likable about this can be applied to most horror films. And yes. I think you're also giving it a little bit too much credit, Zach, just because I don't see anything groundbreaking. And this is from someone also that loves horror movies. But I can tell you, watching this versus Scary Movie 2 or any of those goof movies, it's the same thing. So whether or not the characters are laughing about it, I'm still going to laugh about it. So in Scary Movie, it's clear that this is a comedy. In this stuff, when, the cop says to her, it's like, oh, yeah, you walk in and don't, ask the psychics for help on crimes. And it's like, who would say that to somebody? But at the same time, if they did that in Scary Movie, I would laugh. And I would also laugh in this movie. But I would also not take it as a comedy. I would just take it as a funny moment. And I think that you're kind of seeing Zack as overall as a comedy, or it's giving you the humor as the whole thing is humor, whereas I'm seeing a lot of these little things as funny, and I'm moving on to the whole theme of it still being a horror movie, which most people don't like horror movies because they are cheesy. Like, I hate to say it, but they are, and that's just the way the genre is. And so to go back to it after everyone's tried so hard to reinvent the horror genre, I feel like he was trying really hard to do that and instead failed, and now it's just trying to disguise it as something groundbreaking, like, oh, this was all a joke anyways. I also can't make a great horror movie that's doing anything different, but at the end of the day, is it still entertaining? Is it still solid? It's just like everything on Hulu, Netflix. Anyone can write a script to a horror movie, but it's whether you have good CGI, whether you have good acting, and this movie is missing all those basic things, but it still has a solid story overall.
This is the thing that I think is frustrating. So, it comes down to just interpretation of schlock cinema. And I think, to go back to Rob and I's favorite
most people
Manslaughter,
aren't doing that, though. That's where that matters. Most people aren't looking at it that way.
But that's why I think it's a masterpiece in that regards, that James Wan was able to do it at this level. Like Rob has said.
But he only was able to do it because he had the background to stand on. If you pitch the same movie, if you wrote this and you pitched it, they would probably laugh at you because it's already been done. But they were like, oh, maybe he'll do something different. And I think his reputation is all that he had to go on, because this is not any more special than anything I see from No Name. This is just as good as The Walking Dead. And The Walking Dead people think is fantastic and amazing. The Walking Dead is the same as any zombie movie broken out into a TV show. Same characters. You always have this kid that's protected by some older man that's there. You always have someone that's angry. Like, everything is just so cliche with horror that revolutionary to give this guy this credit. There's no way. I love horror, but he did not do anything.
I don't think it's revolutionary, but it's still the idea that getting this made at this level. What's one
he
step
only got
below
it made, though, because he is who he is. But did he deliver?
Exactly. Well, that's the thing, though. I am so, like I said, I at this point, I don't know if it came out a week before or after Friday the 13th, Part 12. A miracle is a miracle is a miracle. I don't care how it got done, but I got to see a $40 million schlock movie on this level, and that just doesn't happen anymore. We don't get this type of movie on this sort of scale anymore, and I think that's why this movie, it's not revolutionary, it's not the right word, but it should be admired as just, I don't even want to say an achievement. It should be admired for its sheer existence. Because nobody would get this made, never mind want to get this made, other than somebody that has the clout as James Wan. I agree with you 100%, LaShawn, in that regard. And that's why, again, the admiration does not come from it being revolutionary. The admiration comes from it existing at this level from this production house, from Warner Brothers. Like, if this was an independent movie that somehow got kind of like a paranormal, and this is not to compare the movie, but just how it got brought to the mainstream level. And this was like a Paranormal Activity that was filmed sometime in the mid 2000s. And then it was purchased by Paramount and then elevated to this huge just stage. That's its own thing. But it's the idea that James Wan was able to get this done completely in the studio system, solely from the clout he acquired from Aquaman. And I think that's the thing. Again, Rob knows, I've been starved for this sort of just big budget nonsense. I love nonsense. And when I get it at this level, I'm going to admire it in any way I get it. Like I said, this is not a movie for everyone. It's barely a movie for anyone. And I think that's what I'm just trying to get at here. Like I said, this is not a movie for everyone. I'm just disappointed that in the 3+ years we've been doing this podcast, that Rob isn't able to appreciate the idea of just all these weird sort of just bonkers notions. I think it's not that I'm frustrated with Rob. I'm just disappointed with him.
This movie's so dumb.
But like I said, though, it's the idea of, I think Rob and I saw this together, we'd be having an extremely difficult conversation right now. I think this is one maybe core aspect of the late night experience that I have never really thought about until now, is that by watching a movie with somebody, I think influences how you enjoy it or maybe not enjoy it, that's not the right word. Maybe how you digest it. Because I think if Rob and I were sitting here watching this, whether it be in a movie theater, whether it be on HBO Max in a living room, I think if Rob had watched this with me and I'm just cackling, just dying laughing at a little girl, is having a slow like pan and zoom on a little girl begrudgingly picking up a neon glowing phone from her demon conjoined twin, having a conversation with him through this. Like, I couldn't stop laughing. I had to literally in the drive-in, I had to cover my mouth as Rachel yelled at me because I was laughing too hard at this. Like, it was like becoming a scene. I was laughing too hard at it. And that's the issue. I think if Rob were there for that, regardless of the venue, I think it would have fundamentally altered his, I don't want to say enjoyment, but his digestion of the film. And I think that's like maybe the biggest lesson.
And he is laughing at all those things you're mentioning. I think he's just looking at it as more of a scary movie. Like, you know, this is just goofy to me. I can't take this movie seriously.
But this is again the song. This goes back to the men, women, and children dilemma of cinemodities. Rob and I think almost the exact, like, we both interpret the movie almost identically. Our conclusion of it is like night and day, though.
There's a level of whenever Zack mentions men, women, and children, you should think that it's like one person thinks anything about it, and I am so offended, I believe it should not exist. Like, it's offensive to the human species. That's how hard I am against it. And that's men, women, and children. Zack is like, it's a funny movie. And I'm like, it is the most offensive thing I've ever seen.
And that's the problem.
I was going to say that I was going to say that in the last, like, 10 years or so, horror movies have slowed down pretty significantly. And the last enjoyable scary movie or horror flick that I saw was This Is Us. Or even Get Out, I would say. And those were very original thoughts, original ideas. And I feel like those deserve a lot more credit than saying, oh, somebody brought back something that should have died. It's like, you can only make so many Friday the 13th. You can only make so many Nightmare on Elm Streets. I love those movies, but they are hilarious. When you see Jason fold, you know, two teenagers into a taco with a mattress, you know, you're like, how? And it's, you know, people running from him. They run into their neighbor's house. It's like, wow, great. You just brought this guy to me and now I'm dead. Thanks. It's like, that's just stuff that you see all the time. And I feel like he didn't deserve to have been granted this budget for this project. I love what this was, but if you told me that this was a straight to TV movie, I would believe it. And really, other than the ending scene where their budget actually seemed like it was coming into play, everything in the beginning looked like it could have been a Netflix original where it was a very small budget because not much happened. The acting wasn't that fantastic. The scenes weren't that intense. And even once you see Gabriel, you know, what did the one guy say? He looks like the sloth from the Goonies or whatever. It's like, it's right. Like that's hilarious. Like that isn't anything fantastic. And I love horror movies once again, but this is exactly like every other horror movie. And because of that, I love that. I love horror movies, but I don't think that this is amazing. And I wouldn't sit here and tell someone you're going to love this, because if you've seen any horror movie, you probably can guess how this one is going to go.
Yes.
And it's a little twist.
Because of that exact reason is why I hate this. Thank you, LaShawn.
But that's the thing, though. It comes to a level. I think we have 3 different degrees of appreciation of the genre of horror. We have the Rob level, where Rob has not dabbled in any of this, particularly care for it on a good day.
Well, not in terms of movies. I feel like in terms of TV shows, I could, run train on you guys about all these.
We're not talking about TV. We're not talking about TV, though. We're talking about exclusively movies.
I know, but I just want to put that out there.
And LaShawn is more like in the middle, where he's like, okay, he's able to enjoy most horror movies. Like I'd say he's able to appreciate them on a multitude of levels. And I've reached a point where I'm just like, I just want something that's so just bananas. I will take it I'll take it as long as it's on this tier. Like I said, it's not hard to make. Again, like Rob's heard me say this, LaShawn, you haven't. Getting a Hulu movie made is the equivalent of getting a crap movie in the back of the video rental house in the late 80s. It's not hard to do. All you need is about $10,000 in a distributor, and there you go. Anybody can do it. It's the notion of
James... But you say this is bananas, and I don't see the bananas. I think Tremors is bananas. I don't think this is bananas.
But we literally have a $40 million major studio film where in the last 30 minutes we have a Siamese twin burrow its way out of our protagonist's skull and then literally like twist its arms and bones back and just murder a holding cell of 15 women 15 women, like incarcerated women, and then go into a police station and just mow people down where it takes out our two lead detectives by throwing a chair at them. That's not, but that's not,
the transformation is totally benign because we know that she has to walk backwards. Like the movie has previously set up that there's going to be this reversion of bones. So when she breaks her bones to make her arms go the wrong way, it's useless. Like the movie undercuts itself.
I think it was really cool though. I was like, that's kind of cool. Like just watching it happen. I think,
it was cool, but it was stupid cool.
Folks, I think I've made my case loud and clear. LaShawn appreciates this movie in a way that I didn't think was possible. Rob is just being Rob.
This movie sucks. Like literally.
Rob can't appreciate
for what it was supposed to be.
Rob can't appreciate a miracle when he sees it.
I would not recommend this movie.
The Miracle Buffalo would be ashamed of him right now.
You cannot say that, Zach. You cannot.
Yes, I am. I'm going to say that. The Miracle Buffalo.
The Miracle Buffalo is a living creature that you don't have any control over. So no. We're losing LaShawn when we talk about this stuff.
We're making references to things from like 3 years ago.
I guess then that brings us, is there anything else that either, of you would like to talk about with this Malignant discussion, I guess, I think I'm all tapped out of what I had to discuss.
I think, literally, I wish I could go through every single moment of this film because I think it's a masterpiece of nonsense.
Oh, that's kind of crazy, Zach. That is kind of crazy.
we have a broad shot of like a security guard. He's like, "Miss, you can't be here." And I'm like, oh God, like his pacemaker's going to explode. And she's like, but no, Detective Shaw said I could be here. Unless Detective Shaw isn't here. And he starts like clutching his heart. And I'm like, please let his pacemaker explode. Please let his pacemaker explode. And his pacemaker explodes. And I'm just like just giggling uncontrollably because I'm like, this is so goofy. I'm like, okay, I want to say these two can't appreciate you. James Wan, we all know you're listening right now. James Wan, like, I think Conjuring's like a hot mess. Insidious is just more Patrick Wilson nonsense. Saw was cute the first like dozen times. Thank you, James Wan. That's all I'm going to say. Like these two, like I said, LaShawn gets it on a level that I didn't think was possible. Rob's just a narcissistic mess. James Wan, thank you. I want to say from the bottom of my heart, you gave me the best. I'm going to say this now. This is already my favorite film of 2021, and I'm going to be extremely, extremely hard pressed to find a film for the rest of this year that I think is going to be better than this one. I'm just saying that right now. I ordered the poster last weekend for some reason. The post office, I don't know, maybe Rob like hijacked a mail truck and decided to like drive it off of like a cliff by a giant like insane asylum. I don't know what happened, but hopefully it's coming by tomorrow. I am delighted that James Wan was able to birth this movie into the public consciousness. Thank you, Mr. Wan. You have guaranteed I will buy a ticket to Aquaman 2 because of this.
Oh my God.
Zach, you are a crazy person. That was insane. Oh, we appreciate it, though.
Do you now, Rob? Do you now?
I think yes, you have reached a certain level of recording clout that cannot be matched. LaShawn, thank you for being here on this episode of Cinemodities.
Yeah, of course. And now I know a lot about the man, the myth, the legend that is James Wan. So, I mean, I see that Zach's got some love for this guy, and that's cool. It's cool.
I will see any movie he directs after this. No questions asked. He has earned my respect.
I will say, as you were on your spiel there, it made me think of Rick and Morty, and I'll explain why here. Because a lot of people watch Rick and Morty, and it's become a favorite of many people because it's entertaining. But then there's another group of people that love Rick and Morty because it's deep at a whole nother level that is, existentialist this and blah, blah, blah. And it's just the best thing ever when you start diving into what characters represent. And to me, a TV show I shouldn't have to dig that hard for. Times, yes. But for me, I feel like this is a horror movie at the end of the day. And it doesn't matter what you try to dress it up as. It's always funny when you see characters doing things that are so obvious or learning things that are so clearly spelled out. It doesn't matter if it is the man, the myth, the legend doing it. And no matter what, I just feel like I appreciate horror movies because they entertain me. They give me a little bit of chills here and there. And this, as a horror movie, did exactly what it was supposed to do because it followed the same exact recipe that they all do. And so I was spooked at moments. I sat there with the characters and I had a moment where I said, yeah, I thought the same exact thing that you're thinking. And, there's always the researchers that try to figure out exactly what's going on and save the day and just believe in the science. And, then you got the whole subgenre of like animal horror movies. Those are all the same. It's always just very little things that you can do that are going to scare people, especially once it's all been done. So as a horror movie, I like this and I recommend it to people for sure. And I know that I will. But if they're digging deeper, I'm going to tell them it's just not here. But I appreciate your thoughts, Zach.
I am glad to oblige.
All right. Well, I guess if there's any final thoughts, questions, snacks, can we wrap them all together? Zach, I mean, kind of right at the end, I want to ask you, do you think this was better? No, no, I think a different question.
You know what I'm going to say.
A different question that I think you're expecting. Was this better than the Evil Dead discussion?
I'm disappointed that you couldn't appreciate this film.
You're angry at me when you know I would have loved Evil Dead, yeah.
No, I'm mad at the fact that I chose Candyman over this. Like I said, I'm mad at myself. Because I think like I said, Rob, in a different reality, you, Jeremy, Rachel, and I would be sitting at the table a week and a half ago just cackling at the absurdity that was this film.
Absolutely.
I'm mad at myself, Rob. If there is a true villain in this discussion, it's me for choosing Candyman. I am the bad guy here. I am the Gabriel of Cinemodities this Monstober.
Okay.
Cinemodians, please forgive me.
Yes. So I guess with that being said, answering our questions, Cinemodities, late night. Zach, do you want to start?
Oh, okay. This is the one of the few slam dunkest of the slam dunkiest. A hard yes across the board. I've already seen this movie twice. I saw it at a drive-in as a late night movie, and I was delighted. As a Cinemati, of course, like for the aforementioned reasons, and then some. The fact that it's a $40 million just schlock fest. It's I could not, when it comes to Monstober, I could not think of a better representation of what I wanted to get at when it came to this podcast, specifically within the confines of Monstober.
Okay. LaShawn, I want to throw it to you for Malignant. Cinemati's late night. What do you think?
I would say late night, definitely. All horror flicks are always good late night. And as saying, it's a good one to watch with your friends. You're going to have some good laughs. And, I'm sure there will be people hiding behind pillows because there were some moments that were actually pretty, they were intense. They made your blood boil a little bit or, let the hairs on your back stand up a little bit, or neck, wherever the hairs stand up. I don't know what that expression is.
Okay.
And then as far as cinemodities, I would say no, not at all.
Oh, okay. Interesting. So I have to say,
Just another horror film.
Yeah. I think I'm in the same boat as you, LaShawn. Cinemodities and late night, no. This is too boring and too dumb. Man, this is not a good movie. Sorry, Zach. So I guess that brings us to, Zach, do you want to give us or our audience a heads up about what we're doing next week, which you've already recorded?
Are we you tell me, Rob. You're doing the order of all this, what I don't even know what's coming next.
Okay. So this is going to cut out Evil Dead, which, real quick, maybe we can go around. I love Evil Dead. LaShawn, do you love Evil Dead?
I do.
Oh, okay. Zach, do you love Evil Dead?
I appreciate Evil Dead, but it's not the insane masterpiece that this is.
Well, okay, we have, maybe 4.5 stars out of that. But next week, Zach and I will be diving into something that we recorded with Jeremy, I think Friday the 13th, part 12, if I remember correctly.
Okay, so I always wanted this to go as the third week of Monstober, but I guess it's going to be the second.
This was okay.
Scary Tales is the last one. That's probably the easiest way to describe it.
This whole thing is just going to be, able to be edited, whatnot. I'm just, looking at LaShawn, who's like, I don't care about any of this. This is all like background stuff. So I guess we should say at the end of all this, LaShawn, thank you for being here. We are very happy to have you discuss another new horror movie with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And Zach, appreciate all the good conversation and different points that I did not consider when I first watched this. So thank you guys.
Thank you for coming on, LaShawn. Thank you for being a guest to this, to Rob's ignorance and just folly. We need a witness for these sort of discussions.
Absolutely. And so I will put all the appropriate links in the show notes for you to listen to and watch LaShawn's YouTube channel, LJ's Garage, where he discusses cars and vehicles and all that type of stuff. And I guess the last thing we have to say is how we end this episode. Well, it has to be, as we said, our opening credits in reverse. Did you have some?
No. Oh, yes, I do, Rob. There's a song played in this movie.
You
yes,
really want to go with the Pixies? Where's My Mind?
No, You're Painted. No, there's a song in this movie by Brian Ferry called Your Painted Smile. Jesus, Rob. God, I'm the only person who actually cared about this.
Probably.
We didn't do snacks, which means we're going to the it's going to the 4-year extravaganza.
Did we really not do snacks?
Yes.
I waited.
I deliberately, I'm so glad. I'm so glad I'm going to be able to get a redux on this in a couple months. Suck it, Rob. Suck it. I'm gonna get my appeal on
this. Okay, LaShawn, you have 100% legal responsibility to hang up right now. This is just Zach and I. LaShawn, you have 100% legal responsibility to hang up because I'm gonna turn off my camera. Yes, thank you. Okay,
bye,
LaShawn, I'll talk to you later.
Thank you for being a good sport.
There's no way we did not.
Suck it, Rob. I deliberately kept my mouth shut. In the spreadsheet, no snacks, which means I get it. I get my appeal. Come on.
Oh, okay. You're right. Yeah.
Suck it, Rob. This is the price you pay for not recognizing excellence.
Let me hold on. The file is still recording.
I don't care.
I will
LaShawn didn't give us snacks, so it doesn't count.
I won't turn it off, so we can do whatever we want. I'm just saying. Yeah. Malignant sucked, man.
You suck.
Malignant was fucking boring as hell. What a basic piece of bullshit, turn, twist, quotes, twist in the end. That shit didn't matter. That was terrible.
Just because you don't have a good sense of humor, don't take it out in the movie.
You know me. Okay, so let's get real talk right here. Why the hell does this have any relation to Freddy Got Fingered? I know you sent me
the backwards man.
Okay,
the backwards
I get
man.
that, the backwards man, because it's the face in the back of her head. I watched the first bit of that Red Letter Media review where Jay said, he was like, this reminds me of Freddy Got Fingered. And I perked my ears up, and he said, in the sense that somebody got a green light for a movie that no studio would ever have greenlit without previous success. And that's the loosest connection to what a Freddy Got Fingered concept is. I don't think this movie is Freddy Got Fingered. I think it is something well beyond that. You know what I mean?
Well, I think the point he was getting at was the notion of somebody like taking their pre-existing clout and just like turning it against the powers that be. Like they expected a very specific thing and they got the exact opposite of that.
Okay, that is not unique to Tom Green in 2001 at all.
Yeah, but on this sort of like level, just making something that is just so bonkers. No, I'm not going to argue with you. Freddy Got Fingered is the more extreme of the two.
This is the thing that I was saying in our recording. This is not bonkers. Nothing about Malignant is bonkers. Malignant is basic as hell.
I know, but it's not basic considering the people who are buying it are the most basic people in the world. What it is, it's like selling a Filet-O-Fish to somebody expecting a Big Mac.
No, and you're right. If we want to discuss who you're selling it to, you're absolutely right. In terms of story, that's where I'm coming from. This is the least original thing in existence.
I vehemently disagree to that description. I don't think it's
I said, X-Files, Fringe, Warehouse 13, Law and Order. They've done Conjoined Twins episodes.
Rob, if we're going to throw out everything because it's not the most original thing to exist, then 99.9% of media should be discarded.
I agree with you on that fact, but I'm saying at the same time, nobody can come here saying that this is an original or a wildly original screenplay.
I don't think anybody's claiming it's a wildly original.
Okay, thank you. That's what I've been hearing. That's what I've been hearing. You told me about this, and you said this is crazy. We should watch it. Everything else I've been hearing about is that this is the most insane thing. That's why I
relative to what it's crazy relative to all the other nonsense they keep churning out.
That's what I'm saying. Is that this is not anything original. It's something new for our time.
Well, yeah, if that's the case, then like I said, if we're going to distill everything by the fact that whether it's the most creative thing of its genre.
No, I'm not saying we rank any of the things based on this. I just really want everybody to know that this is not the first time any of this has happened.
I don't think anybody's claiming that, though.
That's fair. Good.
Is anybody claiming this is the most original thing to ever exist? I think it's the notion of James Wan, who's known for a very particular shtick, released something that was under the guise of this very particular shtick, and then pulled the rug out from underneath a bunch of normies.
And that is good. I'm fine with that.
Okay. Good. I'm glad we agree.
I gotta find you the goddamn Nowhere Inn for that movie. That movie was so good.
Oh, Rob, you goober, you.
Yes.